Today we are going to be talking about old growth forests and why this spring and summer are is going to be one of the most important times ever for old growth forests in BC. We're going to talk about the issues, we're going to drink some coffee, and we're going to have some fun. In fact, let's mix it up and start with a question. What does a mathematically inclined acorn say when it grows up? It says, gee, I'm a tree. My name's Torrance Cost. I'm the National Campaign Director for the Wilderness Committee, and this is the very first episode of our Coffee Talk series, which is one of the ways that we're working to get in touch with our supporters, get in touch with the public during this time. One of the ways that you can help is to help with that reach, to help get the word out, and do that by doing what I'm doing right now, which is to share this video on your social media. I'm just going to find it on my Facebook, and then, oh, I opened it up by accident, and share that on my own page. If you can do that, it helps get the word out to more people. If you can hammer that like button down in the corner. If I say something you like, hit the laugh button. If I say something funny, hit the love button. If I say something you love. If I say something you don't like, keep it to yourself. Ask questions if they come up in the comment box there, and I'll get to those at the end. So if I say something that you're not sure of, ask a question, I can keep an eye on them, and at the end, I'll get to that. So let's jump right into it. Old growth, what is it? Why does it matter? When we talk about old growth, there are a lot of different ways that it can be defined. We can talk about age class, we can talk about characteristics. What we're thinking of at the Wilderness Committee is forest that hasn't been logged industrially by people. All forests everywhere have been used, stewarded since time immemorial here in BC by Indigenous peoples. But that's not the same as being completely removed by the landscape by industrial logging. So if it hasn't been industrially logged, that's old growth, and that's what's so critical. That's what matters. This type of forest is extremely rare. It's almost been completely logged out, especially the richest, most highly productive valley bottom old growth. When you close your eyes and picture old growth rainforest, that's what we're talking about, and it's so scarce. So while we may disagree with government on what should be done about that, at least we can agree on that, right? That we are running out of time and that this is very scarce, right? Nope. Unfortunately, government cherry picks and skews the data to misrepresent what is left of these ecosystems to make it look like we're doing all right. Every time the public gets outraged about an old growth forest being logged, an old growth forest being cut down, they say, hey, don't worry about it. It's all good. Like half of the old growth is protected. What they don't say is that they are using the percentage of what remains, not the extent of what was there. So half of the old growth is half of the tiny fraction that we haven't got to yet. And misrepresenting the statistics like that is inherently flawed, because I can say, look, there's this much coffee in this cup. I'm never going to drink this much, right? So, a little less than half the coffee is protected. Now, half the coffee is protected. Now more than half the coffee is protected. As I keep drinking it, or as we keep logging old growth, the percentage of what's protected gets higher and higher. So we can keep destroying these ecosystems and eventually get to 100% of the ecosystem is protected. This is epic shadiness on behalf of the government, and it really needs to change. The Ministry of Forest, the Forest Minister, has a responsibility to step up and be honest about this, or he's going to be remembered as dishonest Doug Donaldson. And while Triple D is admittedly a cool nickname, I don't think that's why what he wants to be remembered as. So why does this matter? It matters for all kinds of reasons. The one that I want to start with is how what you can relate to, how these forests make us feel, and how the experience of them is for us as humans. I'm lucky enough to spend a lot of time out in these ecosystems. I grew up in them, and I spent a week this time last year. I just got one of those FaceTime or Facebook memories. That this time last year we were out in old growth rainforest in Maamtegela territory on northeastern Vancouver Island. Witnessing the ongoing logging of these ecosystems, and that being in an old growth forest or being in an old growth clear cut, it has this visceral reaction that it brings up in us. We know that it's wrong. We know that we shouldn't be doing this. That spiritual connection, that personal importance, that has huge benefits on our emotional well-being, on our physical and mental health, and also that has economic value as well. People recognize how important this is, and they pay money to come here when it's not a pandemic and experience that. So keeping these forests standing is critical to BC's brand as beautiful BC, and to the tourism economy, which if done right can be sustainable. Next, I want to talk about the fact that we experience these ecosystems in a really real way, but they are home to countless other creatures and species. So many species can only thrive in intact, healthy forests, forests that aren't fragmented by logging and disrupted too much. For species from the tiniest lichens, invertebrate species, cute little frogs, right up to fearsome, terrifying carnivores like bears. And there's also a huge overlap between I know bears are omnivores; they're wildlife folks. The marine ecosystems are intricately tied to forest ecosystems, from the natal streams of the salmon runs to just the fact that we say rainforest, there's rain, and that all runs downhill, and that all interacts with the marine environment. So the health of forests is tied to the health of marine ecosystems and the species there, such as octopus and whales. For those of you that don't know, my partner and I are expecting our first child later this month, pardon me. And so, yeah, we're already up to our knees in stuffed animals, apparently. So we'll see how that goes. Next, I want to talk about the importance of old growth in terms of economic sustainability. Forests are important to local economies, and not just in terms of logging and deriving benefit there, but in terms of keeping communities sustained, keeping communities lasting. And if too much of our rural economy is based around cutting down old growth forests, that's inherently risky. It's inherently dangerous. Old growth forests are not renewable. We can replant trees, but we cannot replant these 10,000-year-old ecosystems. Only nature can do that. Tree huggers and loggers have been pitted against each other for decades, while corporations have made out like bandits. Huge profits, massive returns to shareholders, and now folks in the logging industry and environmentalists are just as worried, just as terrified. It's not old growth logging it's not sustainable jobs or protected forest. It's for decades been corporate profits at the expense of both. That's what needs to change. And there truly is a way to have healthy forests and healthy forest communities. Lastly, I want to touch on two elephants in the room. There's no elephant stuffed animals around, so Mom, if you're watching, maybe take a note of that. The two elephants are decolonization and Indigenous rights and the climate crisis. On that first piece, the hugest priority that we have here in Canada is decolonizing, is fixing the relationship between our jurisdictions and the Indigenous nations whose territories they overlap. There's nothing more important than that, and indigenous cultures that are worthy of protection and preservation in their own right, they grew up in and around intact original ecosystems, not tree plantations. Indigenous nations have been excluded from the forest industry, and a lot of the impacts of old growth logging have disproportionately impacted these nations. My friend Joe Martin, or Tutu Quishnasit of the Cloquiet Nation. Apologies if I bungled your name there, Joe. He's taught me that old growth forests are the only places that cedar comes from. Cedar logs suitable for canoe carving comes from. Joe is recognized as one of the best living canoe carvers in the world, and he argues passionately that we can't grow cedars big enough for dugout canoes, big enough for totem poles in second growth forests. I think if we're serious about reconciliation in this country, we need to grapple with the fact that old growth forests need to be set aside, and we need to be returning land and control of forests to First Nations. Secondly, climate change. Climate change is the greatest challenge that we face, period. Not the biggest environmental issue, the biggest challenge, period. And forests have a massive role to play in that. We're already locked into a certain amount of climate change, about a degree and a half, and that's going to bring more precipitation, as well as worsening storms, along with hotter, drier summers, and jurisdictions that have more intact ecosystems are going to fare better. Those ecosystems serve as buffers, and here in BC that means intact forests. So these forests are our strongest shield against the impacts of climate change that we're already facing. In terms of future impacts and how bad they get, they're also our sharpest sword, or our strongest weapon, because old growth forests absorb and store more carbon than younger forests do, especially over the next few decades, which are really the few decades that matter in this fight of our lifetimes. So again, this is the hugest challenge we face, and by continuing to allow the logging of old growth, the BC government is setting down our sharpest sword and our strongest shield, and that needs to change. If I was to go through all the reasons why old growth logging needs to end, we'd be here all afternoon, and the point of this is short and sweet. So I'm going to drop our latest publication into the comments right now. Check that out. There's lots more info in there, and please let us know if you have any questions on that. Right now is such a critical time because of decades of activism on this. People have been fighting for old growth forests long before I was born, and I'm reminded of that pretty frequently. This movement has forced the BC government to review its broken old growth policies, and that review wrapped up just last week. And now, over the coming months, the BC government will be deciding what changes to implement. So it's possible that this spring and summer could be the most important time ever to put pressure on our provincial government to protect these ecosystems. Obviously, a priority right now is recovering from COVID-19. That needs to be a priority for the BC government, for all governments. But I think that it can also be the time, because we're rebuilding everything anyways. Let's rebuild our economic system in a way that's not based on old growth logging. I wrote an op-ed in the Times Colonist last week, which I'll drop in the comments also right now, and I hope that you'll check that out and echo that this is the perfect time. It's not too busy. There's not too much going on to act and change old growth policies. This is the perfect time to do it. To help us continue to do this work, if you're tuning into this live stream, if you're watching later, please consider helping out the Wilderness Committee. There's lots of worthy causes, lots of mutual aid efforts that need our help right now. But if you can help us out, there's a donate link in the comments right there, and that would really go a long way to help us. And in terms of what that work looks like, in terms of what the movement to protect these forests looks like right now, obviously under normal circumstances, with this important government review happening, or pardon me, wrapped up, and now the government making decisions, under normal circumstances, we'd be gearing up for marches, mass rallies, huge gatherings, public meetings, all things that it's not yet safe to do here in BC. So instead, we're taking this fight online and setting up actions that are safe for people to take part in. I'm going to drop the action page that we have on our website. I think there's 5 or 6 different ways that you can take action from your own home and get in touch with our lawmakers. I think that we need to be putting into words again and again and again why this is so important. It's not just about one person signing a petition or another person making a phone call. It's about all of us doing these actions and doing them again and doing them again and doing them again, and letting them know that this isn't an issue that we can ignore. In terms of what to say, put that into your own words. Say what you feel. Talk about what these forests mean to you, what they mean to your families, what they mean to future generations, and yeah, that's really what's most powerful. Is putting it into your own words, putting it into. Oh, hey, hi, baby. How's it going? Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm just in the middle of a live video where we're talking about old growth forest. There's folks watching. It's lots of fun. The old growth reviews happening right now, and yeah, no, okay. Oh, you want me to tell them that? Yeah, I can introduce you. Yeah. This is our baby. It's not due till next week, but it's popping in to say hello, which is fun. And yeah, the baby hasn't been to an old growth forest yet, but I'm sure it's going to enjoy that. What? You want me to say? You want me to say that? Okay. You want me to say it right now? Okay. Okay, I'll say it. Yeah, I'll say it. I'm not going to say that about the Western Forest Products CEO, but I'll tell them the other thing. So the baby says it wants to get out into old growth forests, and it's counting on all of you to take action and speak up so that it can have that opportunity when it gets old and gray like its dad. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming, baby. So have fun with it. Activism is supposed to be fun. These forests will be protected because of our passion, because of our love for them. And with that, I don't want to talk and talk. I want to open it up and roll into some comments. So again, help us with the reach of this video. Share it if you can. Hit like. Scroll up through those links that I dropped into the comments. And if you're watching this later on, later this afternoon, tonight or tomorrow after the live broadcast, to drop a question in the comment too, and we'll get back to you in the coming days. And so that let's open it up. Let's open it up for questions. Most of the comments are about the props and the baby so far. Here's a question from Josh Turner. Is BC timber sales involved in old growth logging? This is a great question. First of all, yes, it is. And second of all, for folks that don't know, BC Timber Sales is the BC government's own logging agency. So it's an in-house government department within the Ministry of Forests, and it has control over a certain chunk of forest in BC, and it plans and auctions off logging cut blocks that companies then bid in and go in and log, with the money then going back to the provincial government. So it's really it's important that we understand that our government isn't just permitting old growth logging. In a lot of cases, about 20% of logging in BC, or 1/5, is actually done by the BC government. The logging in unceded Montegala territory that I was talking about earlier in the video, that's done by BC Timber Sales and BC Timber Sales is logging right now in old growth forests. We're working on a really fun project to track that right now to kind of map it out on a provincial level and show the scale of that. So stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. It's kind of a race to get that out before the baby comes. We'll see who wins. Yeah, so BC Timber Sales is logging old growth, and that's a huge part of the problem. Next question is from Colette. Do you see a happy medium? Is there a plan that works for everyone? I'm assuming this refers to a way to do logging that works for everyone, and I absolutely think there's a way to do it that works for everyone. It has been done on this coast before, not for a long time, but essentially forests have been used extensively since time immemorial in BC by Indigenous peoples. Old growth forests were used for everything from transportation and dugout canoes to art in totems and carvings, to weapons, to everyday products, to clothing. And after 9,000 or 10,000 years of that, my ancestors got to this coast and wrote in their journals things like virgin, pristine, untouched. That's how sustainably managed it was. You couldn't even tell that these forests were being utilized. Obviously, there's more people now. We live in bigger houses, but I think that getting back to those ethics, those values grounded in respect, and a really respectful way of seeing the forest as a relative, not just as a resource. I think there is a way we can do that. Lots of jurisdictions do far better than we do. Just down in Washington State, forests are managed a bit more sustainably. There's models in places like Scandinavia that are really interesting. And I definitely think there has to be a way to manage forests for ecological values as well as meeting our needs. And the reality is we will be doing second and third growth forestry only within my lifetime, either because we protect what's left of the old growth or because the rest of it's gone. So it's not if we make this transition, it's when, and we're arguing for making it sooner. A question from Elizabeth: what would sustainable forestry look like? I kind of spoke to that a second ago, but essentially there is an annual cut, a level of harvest that is sustainable, that can be done year after year after year. In a garden, you can see this. If you pick all the plants and don't keep any seeds and don't plant any back, you won't have a garden the next year. There is a level though that with replanting and with regrowth, this isn't a perfect analogy, but we can replace what we're cutting. But in terms of old growth logging, that can't be sustainable. Those forests weren't planted by people, and so people can't replant them. In terms of forestry, second and third growth can be sustainable. In terms of old growth, it's closer to timber mining than silviculture or forestry, and that needs to change. A question from Michael. Hi Torrance, will Wilderness Committee be trail building this year? Probably one of the things I've been thinking most about in the last couple weeks. Our field team, Jeff over in Vancouver, Emily Hoffpower in our island office. We've been talking about when, if, and where it will be safe to build trails this season. Our first couple of trips are canceled because they were scheduled for this month and into June. So the answer is, I don't know, but I hope so. And I think so. First and foremost, the call on this isn't the Wilderness Committees. It's the First Nations whose territories we build and whose communities we go near, who we're working often in partnership with. So this year we have plans to get up to Colloquiate territory and Ahousaht territory in Clayoquot Sound, as well as Pacheedaht territory in on the southwest coast, closer to Victoria, and then up to Mamtegala territory on the northeast island. And we're not going to go there to those communities unless we feel it's safe and unless those First Nations feel it's safe. So be patient. I know that you and others are interested. Our trail building program is always popular. Our trips are always overbooked, and we need to make sure there's a way to do it safely, to be able to practice physical distancing. In the forest, that's, you know, easier. Our concern is with travel, right? Getting volunteers into cars for a day or a half day at a time. That's what we're concerned about. And yeah, if we do get anything going, it will probably be much later in the summer and into the fall. Another question from Colette. I'm a supporter of the Wilderness Committee. I always fill out the online action tools. Thank you. Is there anything that is really powerful that as an individual I can do to help with forests? I think that, you know, the reason that we're doing this coffee talk today is because the most important thing we have is connection to each other. Getting in touch with your family members, your friends, all the different people that you're connected with, and telling them about this. Obviously, that's a lot more online. It's a lot more over the phone right now. You know, hopefully in another month or so, you know, you could meet a friend at a park and chat with them about this. But that's it. You know, we hear from hundreds of people that care deeply, thousands of people that care deeply about these forests. And the only way to convince government is to make it clear to them that those of us are in the majority, and that they can't afford not to make change. Keep writing those letters, share the action tool, share it with your friends. And again, speak to your own experience. Don't say old growth is important, you know, because of water retention levels or endangered species habitat, or at least don't say those kinds of things first. They are important, but speak to what they mean to you. Speak to why you personally want to see them protected, and really make them feel what you feel, and that's how we build a sustained movement that can win. Question from Hannah. We've got about 5 minutes left for questions here. What kind of buy-in for the protection of old growth forests being from forest workers at the moment? That's a really good question, and a key one. It's varied. It's really, really varied. Lots of forest workers are concerned that our message is simplified. They're concerned about the idea that ending old growth logging will end their employment or end some businesses in their towns. Which is partly due to management decisions and partly due to the fact that we've been told that for our whole lives. In rural communities, industry and government are unified in this message that protecting old growth hurts jobs, and really discouraging of any conversation around any other possibility. We've tried to have that conversation because government won't. In the last year and a half or so, we've held more than a dozen open town hall meetings with our friends at Sierra Club, and in logging communities on northern Vancouver Island, and they're always full, they're always packed, and they're emotional, they're tense, but they're some of the most powerful work that we do. And while there isn't always agreement on what should happen, on what policy should be enacted, on what changes should be made, there is pretty much consensus that this current status quo isn't working. No one has come up to us and said, you know, forests are being and we don't need to make any changes. At least not anyone who doesn't make a six-figure salary working as an executive for a logging company. So the idea that something needs to change is well established, is there. It's just the how we get there that there's a little bit of disagreement on. Fortunately, there's a pretty wide sort of acceptance and support for old growth protection among unions that represent workers in mills, which is absolutely key. A huge thing that that lots of folks don't know is that most of the workers in the forest industry don't work in the forest. They work in mills. About 75% of the industry works in milling and processing, and not in the forests. And that's a huge opportunity. How can we do more with the logs that we are cutting down as we move to protect old growth and keep those jobs protected and stable? Those are the that's a huge opportunity for us. And unions like Unifor and PPWC, the Public and Private Workers of Canada, are massive unions representing mill workers in BC, and they have both passed resolutions supporting protection of old growth, of remaining old growth forests. So we're really hopeful that this can translate into a broader push, and that the BC NDP government will see the writing on the wall on this, and see that it's not, you know, if old growth logging is going to come to an end, it's when, and move to do it sooner and provide for a fair and just transition for those workers and those communities. I think we've got time for one more question. It's from Beth. It seems to me the big forest companies should be motivated to look for more sustainable options because those old trees are running out, but they're clearly still only motivated by immediate, easy profits. What are the chances our government is really going to play hardball with them? Ooh, that's a tough question to end on. I think it's up to us. I think if government thinks that they could cave to the big forest companies, Western Forest Products, Interfor, Mosaic, and get away with it, I think they will. You know, these are powerful interests. They're powerful companies. They often use jobs in ridings that are important to the government as leverage, and say, oh, you know, if these rules change, we'll probably have to cut, you know, several hundred jobs in this riding that's really important to you. And obviously that pressure is real for the government. So I think we need to raise more pressure. We need to be a bigger problem for government. So I think the chance is they're long, but we can do it if we work together, if we speak up, if we're talking to everyone we know, and telling them to talk to everyone in government they know, and making this the spring and summer of old growth, seizing this opportunity to rebuild through this pandemic, rebuild what truly is one of the most important economic sectors in a way that can actually be sustained. That very much can include the protection of these ecosystems, these old growth forests that we'll never see again if we cut them down. I think I'm going to wrap it up there. We're at half an hour. I didn't even drink too much of my coffee. My mug has a pun on it. And yeah, I want to thank you all for tuning in. If you're watching later, thanks for giving this a replay. And remember that this is the first in a series. So these are going to be happening weekly with different Wilderness Committee campaigners. Same bad time, same bad place next week, Thursday at 10 a.m. I think my colleague Joe Foy, our Protected Areas campaigner, will be up, which will be a lot of fun. And yeah, we want to keep these light, keep them fun, and hopefully, you know, find a way to connect with all of you through this pandemic. So I had lots of fun today. I enjoyed making silly jokes and all these props. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Take care.